He acquired an empty starport to spend his final days alone. Then the real owner suddenly returned. HFY. Captain Elias Varn had spent most of his life among the stars. For decades, he had flown faster-than-light ships, negotiated with alien councils, and faced dangers that would have ended a normal human's life long ago. He had seen worlds rise and fall, empires crumble, and countless civilizations fight over resources, honor, or fear. And now, at the age of 67, Elias was tired. Tired of war. Tired of politics. Tired of constant demands from authorities and corporations alike. He wanted nothing more than silence, peace, and perhaps a chance to remember what it meant to be just human. That desire led him to the most unexpected decision of his life. He purchased an empty starport tucked away in the far reaches of the Orion expanse. It was a relic, a massive structure that once served as a hub for interstellar trade and exploration, now abandoned and almost forgotten. Elias called it Edgeport 9. When his ship finally docked at the starport, he felt a strange mix of awe and relief. The main docking bay stretched wider than any hangar he had ever seen. Its metal walls were scratched and dented, but they still gleamed faintly under the dim emergency lights. The quiet hummed through the empty corridors like a song. It was a sound he could listen to for hours without growing tired. Elias stepped off his shuttle, boots echoing softly on the steel floor. He ran his hands over the control panels in the bay, checking the systems. Most of them were offline, long since abandoned, but a few maintenance droids stirred, their sensors blinking awake at the sound of his presence. "This will do," he whispered to himself. "This is perfect." Over the next few days, he began to explore. The starport was enormous, far larger than he had imagined. Hangars stretched for kilometers. Observation decks offered breathtaking views of nearby star clusters, and corridors twisted in a labyrinth of metal and circuitry. He discovered storage rooms filled with old supplies, long dormant shuttles, and a few functioning robots that moved with slow, careful precision. Elias quickly established a routine. Mornings were spent in the observation deck, drinking coffee and watching the slow dance of distant stars. Afternoons were for tending a small indoor garden he had set up using some alien flora seeds he had collected during his travels. He was surprised how much joy the green plants gave him. In a galaxy full of endless metal and cold machines, life, even the smallest form, felt precious. Evenings were for reading and writing. He pulled out his old notebooks and began documenting his life, his mistakes, his triumphs, and his regrets. He wrote of the battles he had fought, the worlds he had visited, and the friends he had lost. Writing gave him a sense of purpose again, a way to leave a mark on a galaxy that often moved too fast to notice one person. At first, the silence was comforting. The absence of chatter, alarms, and constant demands felt like freedom. But slowly, Elias began to notice subtle things. A door that should have been closed was slightly ajar. A droid that had been deactivated suddenly moved when he walked past. Strange energy readings flickered on the starport's main sensors, weak pulses that seemed almost like a heartbeat. He dismissed most of it as old systems malfunctioning. After all, the starport had been abandoned for decades. Dust and decay could cause strange readings. Yet a small part of him wondered if it was something else. Something alive. One night, as he stood on the observation deck, gazing at a distant nebula that shimmered in shades of violet and gold, his thoughts wandered. He had planned this solitude for years. He had dreamt of it while trapped in noisy command centers, fighting bureaucrats and surviving ambushes in deep space. And now that he had it, it felt different. Loneliness crept in quietly, almost unnoticed. But Elias was nothing if not practical. He reminded himself of why he was here. He had traded noise and chaos for this. He had traded safety for freedom. And in a few more years, when he could finally relax completely, he would leave his story behind and perhaps nothing more would matter. Then, the sensors blinked. A small dot appeared on the starport's long-range scanners. At first, he thought it was a passing comet or a distant ship on the edge of explored space, but it moved with intent, straight toward the starport. Its speed was unusual, too fast for a trader, too steady for a scout. Elia's heart quickened. He had spent decades judging situations in seconds, making life-or-death decisions on instinct. Now that instinct told him this was no ordinary ship. He watched as it drew closer, a sleek vessel with sharp lines and a polished hull that reflected the starlight. The sensors could not identify its origin. It was a ghost, a shadow in the black sea of space, coming to a starport that was supposed to be abandoned. Elias activated the main docking bay lights. The ship aligned itself perfectly with one of the massive hangars, then slowly descended. He opened the communication channels. A calm, synthetic voice greeted him, a greeting he had not heard before, in a language he did not recognize. For the first time in years, Elias felt a spark of fear. Not of death, not of battle, but of the unknown. He grabbed an old blaster, not because he expected a fight, but because it made him feel alive again. His boots echoed in the empty corridor as he walked toward the hangar, lights flickering with each step. When the ship finally landed, the ramp lowered with a quiet hiss. Elias squinted through the haze of the hangar lights. Figures began to emerge, tall, humanoid but not human. Their suits gleamed, their helmets reflecting the starport's dim glow. Elias' pulse raced, but he kept his voice steady. "Who are you?" he called out. The lead figure paused, then removed their helmet. A human face stared back at him. A woman, young, determined, with sharp eyes that seemed to measure every inch of the starport. Her voice was strong, commanding, and yet familiar. "This is my starport," she said simply. "You have no right to be here." Elias froze, his mind raced. He had purchased the starport legally, or so he thought. How could someone else claim it? And why had she arrived out of nowhere at this exact moment? The woman stepped forward, her eyes scanning the silent corridors, the empty hangars, the maintenance droids. She seemed almost amazed to find the place functional, alive in a way it should not have been after decades of abandonment. Elias straightened his shoulders, trying to mask his surprise. "I bought it," he said, "fair and square. No one else owned it, or so I believed." She shook her head. "You were mistaken. This starport belongs to my family. We've protected it for generations, and now it is time it returned to our care." For the first time in years, Elias felt a flicker of excitement. Not the quiet joy of solitude, but the spark of life that comes when challenges arise. He had come here seeking peace, but perhaps the universe had other plans. As the two stared at each other across the hangar, the distant stars shining through the massive windows, Elias realized that his final days of solitude might not come at all. Yet, even as the tension grew, he could not deny a strange thrill. For decades, humanity had survived impossible odds, outwitted stronger and faster species, and adapted in ways the galaxy had not expected. Perhaps, he thought, this was just another test of human ingenuity. And for the first time in years, Elias felt alive. Little did he know, the arrival of the real owner was only the beginning. The starport held secrets older than most civilizations. And forces far beyond human understanding were about to notice that someone, humans, were once again in control of something they thought they could not claim. The night stretched on, the distant nebula casting shadows in the massive hangar. Elias and the woman, Lyra Kale, he would soon learn her name, stood in silence, two humans on the edge of an abandoned empire, ready to discover whether survival and courage could still define them. The stars outside seemed to whisper promises of challenge, discovery, and the unknown. And for Elias, it was a reminder that even at the edge of solitude, humanity's spark could never truly be extinguished. The massive hangar of Edgeport 9 was silent except for the soft hum of old maintenance droids. Elias Varn, his heart still racing from the sudden arrival of the unexpected visitor, took a cautious step forward. Across from him stood the woman, Lyra Kale, her eyes sharp, her posture confident. She was not a threat in the traditional sense. Yet she exuded authority, the kind only someone who had inherited responsibility from generations could possess. "I don't understand," Elias said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I purchased this starport legally. All the papers were clear. I didn't know anyone else claimed it." Lyra's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "It may have been legal on paper, but the legacy of this starport cannot be sold. It has belonged to my family for centuries. We used it to chart unexplored regions, to protect travelers, to serve as a refuge. And now it must return to its rightful caretakers." Elias sighed. He had hoped for peaceful solitude, yet the universe had other plans. Still, he was a human, and humans were stubborn. He squared his shoulders. "If you want it back, you'll have to show proof. The galaxy is full of old claims and legends. I have the documents that gave me ownership." Lyra stepped forward, activating a small device on her wrist. Holographic images flickered into the air between them. They displayed the history of Edgeport 9, showing star charts, family records, and even old crew manifests. The proof was undeniable. Elias had indeed bought the starport without knowing it belonged to Lyra's family. He nodded slowly. "I see. You truly are the rightful owner. But what about me? I've invested time, energy, I've made a life here, even if only for a short while." Lyra considered this, her eyes softening further. "You have, and I am not unreasonable. Perhaps there is a way we can share the responsibilities. For now, we must focus on what matters most." Elias frowned. "Which is?" Before she could answer, an alert blared from the starport's long-range sensors. The old, dusty interface flickered to life, displaying readings Elias had never seen before. The starport systems were detecting multiple incoming ships, fast, precise, and stealthy. "They're here," Lyra said, her voice tense. "They have come for the starport." Elias' mind raced. He had hoped for peace, not a confrontation, yet the thrill of danger, the test of skill, strategy, and human ingenuity sparked inside him. He glanced at Lyra. "Do you know who they are?" Lyra shook her head. "Not exactly. But whoever they are, they want something inside this starport, something valuable enough to risk a direct assault." For a moment they both stood in silence, the stars outside Edgeport 9 shining like distant beacons. Then Lyra took a deep breath. "We need to prepare. This starport may appear abandoned, but it still holds defensive systems, though outdated. We must use every advantage we have." Elias nodded. "Then we fight smart. That's how humans survive, thinking, out-planning, and never giving up." They began their preparations immediately. Elias went to the control room, analyzing the starport's layouts. He had spent days wandering these halls, memorizing every corridor, every maintenance hatch, and every hidden compartment. That knowledge would be invaluable. Lyra coordinated her small crew, awakening dormant security droids and setting up makeshift observation points along the starport's perimeter. Together, they examined every energy conduit, every reactor, and every docking bay, devising ways to funnel invaders into traps. Hours passed and the distant blips on the sensors grew larger. The incoming fleet was closer now, a cluster of sleek ships that moved like shadows through space. Elias studied their approach. "They're fast," he said, "but not unpredictable. They follow patterns." "We can use that," Lyra smiled slightly. "Then let's use them against themselves." As the first vessels emerged from the dark, Elias activated the starport's old defensive turrets. Some were functional, others were nearly useless. Using quick improvisation, he rerouted power from the main reactors to charge the operational turrets with extra energy. He also linked them to the maintenance droids, allowing automated repair mid-battle. The invaders struck first. A ship fired a beam at the starport's outer shield, testing the defenses. The shield flickered but held. Elias and Lyra exchanged a brief glance. Humans were resourceful. They never waited to react. They acted, adapted, and learned in real time. Elias tapped into the Starport's old docking systems, opening and closing hangar doors in rapid sequence. This created false entrances and confusing paths, causing the enemy fleet to miscalculate their approach. Several ships collided with the outer hull or each other, sparks flying as metal twisted and groaned. Lyra directed her crew from the observation deck, issuing commands with precision. Target that ship. Divert power to Turret 6. Use the maintenance drones to block the approach from the north. The first wave of attackers began to falter, unprepared for the strange combination of human cunning and the Starport's forgotten systems. Elias allowed himself a small smile. He had always loved challenges. This was the ultimate test, to defend a structure that seemed abandoned but was actually a trap waiting to be sprung. Hours turned into tense cycles of maneuvering, dodging, and clever traps. The invaders adapted, but Elias and Lyra adapted faster. They used gravitational anomalies near the Starport to create unexpected movement, redirecting enemy ships into asteroid fields or magnetic storms. Maintenance drones transformed into improvised barriers, and old cargo containers became makeshift turrets. Through it all, Elias and Lyra began to understand one another. They argued at first, clashing over strategies and priorities, but their shared determination forged respect. Elias admired her courage, her decisiveness, and her unwavering dedication to the Starport. Lyra admired Elias' creativity, his calm under pressure, and his ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. As the battle raged, they discovered something astonishing. Hidden deep within the Starport's control hub was a vault, sealed for centuries, untouched and unclaimed. Ancient glyphs and alien markings suggested it contained a powerful energy source, capable of supplying an entire system for decades. No wonder the attackers had come. "This is it," Elias said, staring at the vault. "This is why they're here. They don't care about the Starport itself. They want what's inside." Lyra nodded. "Then we must protect it at all costs." They devised a plan. The vault would be concealed, its energy readings masked by the Starport's outer systems. False signals would lure the attackers into traps, and if the worst happened, the Starport could be evacuated without the energy source falling into enemy hands. The enemy fleet, realizing the humans were cleverer than expected, intensified their assault. A massive ship broke through the outer defenses, firing concentrated beams into the central hangar. Sparks and flames erupted as structural supports bent and twisted. Elias jumped into a shuttle, using the ship itself as a battering ram to redirect enemy fire, a maneuver so daring it seemed reckless. Yet he was human. Humans thrived in impossible situations, improvising in ways no machine could predict. Meanwhile, Lyra's team activated hidden systems, opening channels that led the attackers into confined corridors. Automated defenses, now repurposed and enhanced by Elias, tore through the invaders' formations. One by one, enemy ships were disabled, captured, or forced to retreat. The battle reached its climax when the lead enemy vessel, massive and heavily armed, approached the vault. Elias piloted a small shuttle, using the asteroid field nearby to hide and maneuver. He navigated through debris, dodged energy blasts, and finally launched an unexpected attack from behind, hitting a weak point in the vessel's hull. It spun out of control, colliding with a derelict section of the Starport, and was destroyed. The remaining enemy ships retreated, their formations broken, their strategy ruined. The vault remained untouched, the Starport secure, for now. Exhausted but alive, Elias and Lyra stood together in the observation deck. The stars outside seemed brighter, as if celebrating the human spirit that had once again triumphed against overwhelming odds. "You were right," Elias said quietly. "Humans do survive against the impossible. We think, adapt, and never give up, even when the odds are against us." Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the distant nebula. "And together we are stronger. This starport, our home, it is safe because we trusted in our skills and because we never gave up." Elias nodded. He had arrived seeking solitude, yet he found purpose instead. Perhaps he had been wrong to think that peace came from being alone. True peace, he realized, came from standing together, from using human ingenuity and courage to face whatever the universe threw at you. For the first time in decades, Elias felt truly alive, not just surviving but thriving. And as the lights of Edgeport 9 flickered softly, the distant hum of old systems echoing in the corridors, he knew that the next challenges would be even greater. Yet he also knew that humanity, with all its flaws and brilliance, would always rise to meet them. The night stretched on, the stars twinkling like distant fires. And somewhere in the galaxy, others were watching, curious about these humans who had survived against impossible odds once more. Elias looked at Lyra, the starport, and the endless black beyond. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together, and we will survive." Because that is what humans do. The quiet hum of Edgeport 9 felt different now. It was no longer just a relic of the past, abandoned and forgotten. It had become a fortress, a human fortress. Captain Elias Varn and Lyra Kale stood on the observation deck, overlooking the docking bays where automated drones moved like guardians in a precise pattern. The battle had been won for now, but they both knew it was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast and news traveled fast. Whoever had sent the fleet before would not give up. They had failed, and failure carried a cost. Elias studied the sensors. At first there was nothing unusual. Then distant blips appeared, moving fast, almost too fast to track. "They're coming back," Lyra said quietly. Her voice carried no fear, only determination. "And this time it won't be just a test. They will come to take everything." Elias nodded. Humans had a saying, when the odds are impossible, ingenuity is the only weapon left. He smiled faintly. "Then we make it impossible for them." They spent the next hours preparing. Unlike before, this attack would not be a small fleet, it would be a coordinated strike. Elias and Lyra used every tool at their disposal. Old turrets were repaired and upgraded. Maintenance drones were multiplied in function, forming moving barricades, repairing damage, and even acting as decoys. Energy conduits were rerouted to create a network of traps. Elias worked on improvisation. He turned cargo containers into impromptu barricades that could move along rail systems, blocking corridors. He modified shuttle engines to create sudden bursts of energy that could knock incoming fighters off course. Every inch of the starport became a weapon, every hallway a battlefield. Lyra coordinated the crew, training them for precise strikes. She combined old military tactics with human creativity. "Use the starport to your advantage," she instructed. "They may be stronger, faster, but we know every inch of this place. Every mistake they make, we will exploit." When the first warning came, the human defenses were ready. A swarm of sleek black ships emerged from hyperspace, moving in perfect formation. The enemy had learned from their previous failure. They were careful, calculating, and deadly. Elias gripped the control console, activating the first wave of traps. Corridors lit up with lasers that guided drones into ambush points. Maintenance robots suddenly sprang to life, using magnetic clamps to immobilize enemy fighters. The attackers were stunned. They had expected an abandoned starport, not one filled with human cunning. "Target the central ship," Lyra ordered. "It's their command vessel. If we take it out, the rest will falter." Elias nodded and maneuvered a small shuttle through a service corridor that ran alongside the central hangar. The shuttle was old, barely functional, but fast and nimble. Using the tight corridors and the starport's gravity manipulation fields, he created a trap. The enemy command vessel, lured by sensors, followed blindly, and the corridor's magnetic field yanked it off course. Sparks flew, shields flared, and the ship was immobilized. Meanwhile, the enemy fleet tried to compensate. Fighters broke off to attack the outer defenses, but Elias and Lyra had prepared for this. Automated turrets opened fire, guided by human intuition rather than programming. They used the Starport's architecture, twisting corridors, hidden hatches, and gravity shifts, turning the environment itself into a weapon. One of the enemy fighters found its way to the vault, aiming to steal the ancient energy source that had drawn them here. Elias and Lyra had anticipated this. The vault was surrounded by a field of energy pulses, which created false sensor readings. The enemy ships could not lock onto it, and when they attempted to breach, hidden turrets disabled their shields. As the battle raged, Elias marveled at the human capacity for adaptation. The attackers were numerous, fast, and well-armed, but humans always found a way. They could think, improvise, and adapt in ways that no machine could predict. Every obstacle the enemy placed, humans had already anticipated or quickly found a solution. Lyra's crew moved with precise coordination, shutting down corridors to funnel enemies into traps, using drones as decoys, and controlling the Starport's power to create sudden bursts that disrupted enemy sensors. Their teamwork was flawless, honed by trust and experience. Elias realized something important. It was not just technology or weapons that won this battle. It was human ingenuity, courage, and teamwork. Alone, either of them would have struggled. Together, they could take on the impossible. Hours passed in a blur of lights, explosions, and energy surges. Slowly, the enemy fleet began to falter. Ships collided with each other or the Starport's defenses. Fighters were disabled, command signals disrupted, and morale began to crack. The human defenders, tireless and clever, kept pressure on them at every turn. Finally, the command vessel that Elias had trapped in the corridor was destroyed. Without its leadership, the remaining enemy ships began retreating. One by one, they fled, leaving behind wreckage that glimmered in the dim starlight. Silence returned to Edgeport 9, but it was different this time. The Starport no longer felt empty. It hummed with life and victory. Elias and Lyra looked at each other, exhausted but triumphant. "We did it," Lyra said softly. "We defended the Starport and we protected the vault." Elias nodded. "Humans always survive, even against impossible odds. We adapt, we think, and we never give up. And today we proved it again." Lyra's eyes scanned the Starport, noting the damage but also the potential. This place, it's more than a relic. It's alive in its own way, and now it has two caretakers who understand it and each other. Elias smiled faintly. "I came here to spend my final days alone. But I see now, solitude is not the only way to find peace. True purpose comes from defending what matters, from standing together, and from trusting human creativity." They walked through the Starport, observing the aftermath of the battle. Sparks flickered in damaged panels, smoke rose from scorched floors, and the hum of reactivated systems filled the air. But despite the destruction, the Starport was intact, its secrets safe, and its legacy secure. As they reached the observation deck, Elias looked out at the stars. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown dangers and challenges. But humans had survived here before, and they would survive again. Their strength was not in weapons or technology alone, but in courage, ingenuity, and the ability to rise above impossible odds. Lyra joined him, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "We will need to rebuild, upgrade, and strengthen this Starport. Others will come, drawn by its value and history, but we are ready. Together, humans can face anything." Elias nodded. "Yes, together humans can face anything." The stars shone brightly, each a reminder of the countless worlds humans had touched, explored, and survived. Edgeport 9 was no longer abandoned. It had become a symbol, a testament to human resilience, creativity, and determination. For the first time in decades, Elias felt truly at peace. Not because the galaxy was quiet, but because humans had proven once again that they could survive, adapt, and triumph, even in the darkest corners of space. And as the night stretched on, the distant hum of the starport and the soft glow of its lights reminded him that this was only the beginning. Humanity had survived impossible odds before, and it would continue to do so, guided by intelligence, courage, and the unyielding spirit that defined them above all else. Edgeport 9 would thrive. Humans would protect it. And Elias, once seeking solitude, had found something far greater: purpose, companionship, and the undeniable proof that even in the vastness of the galaxy, human ingenuity would always shine. The galaxy was still dangerous, still unpredictable, but Elias and Lyra knew the truth that every human carried in their hearts. When faced with impossible odds, humans adapt. They survive, they thrive, and they endure. For now, the stars outside Edgeport 9 sparkled in quiet celebration, as if acknowledging the courage of the humans who had defended what was theirs, and proven that, even in the far reaches of space, human brilliance could never be ignored.